We are on 17 heading to Brookgreen Gardens. This at one time was the home of the wealthiest people in the United States, which at that point in time was the colonies and then post-revolution, all the way up until the Civil War. That's through the Antebellum. It's a former rice plantation, and before you would even think cotton was king, rice was king. The vast majority of the slaves that came to this area were the second choices, or the second tier, from the Caribbean sugar islands, which is where the real money was made in the Western Hemisphere. Wasn't made in the United States colonies. That's why the British were more concerned about their possessions they took from the other foreign powers in the Caribbean. Most of the slaves that came here were captured by other blacks and sold by blacks. They were not having white press gangs going into the African continent and grabbing black people. It was black people that did it to black people, i.e. Zulu. Look at the Woman King. She was notorious for having slaves and selling slaves, but you'll never hear that real history in the public school system or on movies, because it completely destroys the left-wing narrative, and that's all you have. That's why the U.S. is weak, period. Now, we're coming up. You drive in, you see it. It's a pretty little drive. It's an animal preserve. It's an animal preserve, and so you possibly see alligators, deer, wild turkeys, and the like here. They do have a military discount. You just have to ask for it. And the last time we were here, the ticket's good for 7 days. Once we get through this, we'll start filming again. The prices have increased. You gotta love Biden's Build Back Better. Everything's went up. It's with military discount, it's $20 per adult, $22 without it. Adults start at 13, which kind of makes me wonder why they should start at 13 when technically they're not adults till they're 18, and you have babies that consider them children until they're 21, unless of course they're males going into the draft. Then of course they're men. We could hide behind them. Makes absolutely no logical sense. Anyway, back to the history. As you were coming here, the family of this particular plantation, which was the wealthiest family and largest plantation in South Carolina at that point in time, and largest plantation in the nation, was the Austins. And you will recognize the daughter-in-law of the Austins as Aaron Burr's daughter. Aaron Burr was a cabinet member who killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel for banging his wife. That's essentially what happened. Alexander Hamilton didn't believe in duels and fired into the air. Aaron Burr was a Southerner. He believed in duels and dropped his ass. Then you have, remember, Alexander Hamilton was a failed West Indies plantation owner that was trying to sell sugar out of the plantations in the Caribbean and couldn't do it, and came up here and began to do it. And that's where he got his money and start. But I guess you probably don't know that because it's not politically correct. Now, this particular area is known as the Low Country. It's flat. They have a wonderful zoo you can visit, marvelous gardens. They've got wild animals. Do be careful. They do have poisonous snakes. They have a safety patrol that goes through their statue garden and flower garden, but in the past we have came across wild alligators, and I've actually had to save a child from becoming dinner one time. But as we're pulling up into the parking area, this is where you'll park. Remember, you're in the South, so it's advisable to park in the shade even if you have to walk. I know most Americans don't like to walk, but hey, that's part of life. We're in one of the many art galleries here. Well, this is not modern art, therefore you can understand it. It's amazing how they have so many good artists displayed here. Feel free to pause the video anytime you need to read the placards. I can't go in there. It says no smoking and I'm smoking hot. Now look, you tell me this ain't neat. The only problem is this is not native. That came over with the Europeans. That is based off of the Francisca, which is where you get the name Franks, which is where you get the name France from. And they were marvelous axe soldiers. They would throw them and it would bounce. And you couldn't predict, so it would break lines, the infantry lines up. Marvelous. See, that's not... Metallurgy came over with the Europeans. They were still Stone Age. Some of these sculptors and their detail. Wow. Like this brown bear. Wow. Now if you ever get the chance, boy, definitely go to the Tower of London and check out their treasures. They got gold drinks, goblets and bowls that are bigger than this stand. And remember, everything in that is post-English Civil War. So the one that's named, they had multiple civil wars, but the last one, when they brought in Oliver Cromwell, the dictator. have some of these in my home. Like this one. I like that one. Your ancestor was Rocky Mountain Joe Meek. He was a famous mountain man. We are heading into the gardens, and my cohort here will be in charge of the map. So where are we heading into now?
Hold on, where's this one thing in my pocket?
It's beautiful. Most of my people or acquaintances that don't really know me are always shocked. We're going into Ann's garden, by the way. How do I know that? There's a big sign right there. But I'm always shocked by the amount of culture I have and my appreciation for flowers and art and reading, considering I love barbecue, UTVs, ATVs, hunting, fishing, guns, and everything masculine. It always wigs them out. But anyway, enough of me. If you look, you will see they have a dichotomy of colorful flowers and evergreens. And this is all part of Huntington's plan when they owned this after the Great Depression. Now over in Huntington Beach State Park, which rents from this group, they have where they built the house and they call it the castle. And for the locals, it is good, but it's not a castle. And as far as someone who, or anyone that has seen impressive housing, well, not so much. They have a nice little causeway to drive across there, and there is an admission fee. We won't be going. We went there last year. You may or may not see wild alligators on the causeway. All right, where are we going once we turn left? What is it? I couldn't hear you.
Rainy Sculpture Pavilion.
Rainy Sculpture Pavilion. Okay. Another place, there's two places in London you have to go see. Hampton Courts and Kew Gardens. Kew Gardens have got a garden greenhouse of almost every deadly plant in the world.
Time out, I'll be back.
Tom's. After a short bathroom break for the boy, which, by the way, it's important. The bathrooms here are immaculate. They're well taken care of. We're not going to go in there. It looks like they're getting ready to have somebody meet, so we'll do it from the outside. And this is the crossroads. You can go that way and go to the animal center, but we're going to turn left and go into the sculpture garden. And if you look way over there, we may hit it, but you can see where they have their pumpkins, and they set up a Halloween fair for the kiddos. It's really nice down here. They do an excellent job. And they have a thing in the winter after Halloween called the Night of 1,000 Candles, and all this is lit up. And this is down here's where I really wanted to propose to my last fiance, which I'm kind of glad we didn't get married because True Colors came out. But anywho, this is so romantic. This is Dionysus, and this is one of the places where we found one of the wild alligators happened to be in the pool, and this is where the little kid about lost his hand. And if you can look, they're already setting up for the Night of the 1,000 lights or candles. Can't tell me that this isn't pretty.
That tree's grown up more.
It has. It's grown a lot more. Let's go this way. And you could tell the length of an alligator by the distance between its nose and its eyes, and that'll give you a pretty good estimate of how long the alligator is. The one we found in here was about 4 feet. Pretty big enough for a little boy to be really hurt. It's really super quiet here normally, but they're doing construction. They're doing an add-on over here in the off season. And even with it, it's quiet. Down here's where I was wanting to do that deed. I'm glad it didn't happen. Last time we were here, there was a wedding going on. Right here.
Hunting.
Oh, that was Huntington. No, it was here, and they were doing the reception there.
It was?
Yeah, remember they had the chair set up here? You can do wedding venues here. They'll actually let you rent these things out. But yeah, they had the wedding here, and then they were setting up the food tables over in Huntington. Remember?
Yeah, I just remember the chairs over there. I don't remember the chairs here, but
morning. Anyway, you can have the dichotomy of plants because of the longer growing season in the south. The only issue down here is the heat prohibits things like blackberries from, not blackberries, but blueberries from growing well. And even peaches have an issue to becoming ripe because they have to be below freezing in one of their stages several nights in a row to be able to mature. Believe it or not. It is very peaceful. See, they're hanging lights now. They're in the process. Can't go that way, so we'll go this way. Now that Spanish moss is not living off of the trees. It lives in the trees. It gets all of its nutrients from the air. Now mistletoe, which they would use a 12-gauge shotgun to shoot from the top of the trees, is parasitic. And that will live off the trees. Now where it came up with the concept of getting a kiss under it, I don't know. But depending upon the girl, that could be a good or a bad thing. Hmm?
Women are parasites.
They are not parasites. Good grief, boy. You gonna get whooped. Some of them are. Not all of them. Just like some men are parasites. But the L's of society cannot be all blamed on one gender, and that includes males. All right, this is what this garden looks like. And they have a plethora of bathrooms.
We'll come up on another one.
Yep. They have like a little plaza garden in the center of the garden where you can get something to eat or drink, because it does get rather humid and hot down here in the summertime, especially where you're not going to get any wind. And they have a lot of volunteers that work this. Get you a picture.
No, I was trying. I'm seeing how he does. I know she'd send me something earlier. Just haven't popped up yet.
That is one thing God did not bless me with. The ability to do art. Or sing. But I can flat out shoot. Where are we going now, boy?
Poetry garden.
Now, have you noticed how these gardens are squared off and sectioned off into different eras and themes? That's on the British style, which came from the continent of Europe. A good example of that in the States is Williamsburg's Governor's Palace as well. Williamsburg, Virginia. Yeah, I think you got the better idea. We should be coming up on the wall by the creek. I'm going to shut this down for a minute. When this place was a working rice plantation, this was a rice field, and this creek, which is deep enough to be called a river, but called a creek because of the length, was the main thoroughfare from here. It was easier to transport loads, people, and go from point A to point B while on the water than trying to go over land with roads that would take you through swamps and everything else. We're now on the trail beyond the wall, is what they call it, which is kind of like medievalish if you ask me, but I think it's cool. And working our way around so that you can see the natural aspects of the place. This looks like it gets really muddy. But they want to call it a labyrinth. In the governor's palace at Williamsburg and Hampton's Court, which is the governor's palace is based off of, the walls would be made of large evergreen bushes, so you couldn't see which way to go. And it was an actual labyrinth. And just like it did in the movie for Bram Stoker's Dracula, that Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves and Hawkins played in, they would have these labyrinths, and then once they get inside the middle of them, lovers would take over, and that looks to be a little too muddy to walk. But this is the main thoroughfare, and you see the flats and the dikes here. This is where they would dike up the water, because rice has to have a dry period and it has to have a wet period, and it has to be fresh water. And these two green structures right here are known as, and I just knew it 5 minutes ago. That's what lets the water in and out of the rice paddies, and the slaves that worked those came from West Africa, and they're the ones who brought that technology over here. Remember our previous conversation on a previous video, how when we were at Sycamore Shoals, and slaves that had value versus draftees in the United States Army now, right? These guys had massive value. This is what made the money for the plantation. So unfortunately, they were treated as slaves. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it gave them the ability to have job security that was enforced upon them.
We're gonna go the other way.
Yeah, we're gonna go the other way. This looks like a marsh. This is probably left over from the last hurricane. You'll sink up if you try to get in there. So we'll go the other direction and heads towards the boat ramp and the boardwalk. It takes you across the rice fields, and then go maybe to the free zoo, which is a wonderful zoo, and then that'll probably wrap up our trip. But for now, we'll come back later. As we're walking the trail, I remembered the name of that position. It's called a trunkmeister, that came from Western Africa. That's who brought the rice cultivation knowledge and technology here. And this is a tidal flow creek, which means when the tide comes in, this comes up because it backs up the fresh water, and they're able to let fresh water in. And this particular one wasn't a pond. This was a rice field for those who lived on the plantation and not to be sold. They grew rice, indigo, which was introduced by a 16-year-old woman, and cattle on this plantation. Indigo was quite profitable while the colonies were part of the British Empire due to textiles needing dyes. That's one of the few areas the South per capita was more wealthy than the North, because it fed into mercantilism while the North did not.